Sometimes, a stranger's kindness can open doors that money and power never could. Jonathan Pierce, a billionaire used to controlling everything in his life, walked into a busy cafe with his teenage son, Alex. Despite all the wealth surrounding them, Jonathan noticed something he hadn't seen before: his son, withdrawn and quiet, carrying a weight that no amount of luxury could lift. Emily, a young waitress with a warm smile and a gentle heart, noticed Alex's discomfort and offered comfort in the simplest, most human way. That small act of kindness, unnoticed by most, would ignite a chain of events that would change Jonathan, Alex, and even the way he saw the world forever. Jonathan Pierce pushed open the glass door of the small, bustling cafe, the soft jingle of the bell above announcing his entrance. The scent of freshly brewed coffee and warm pastries enveloped him, but he barely noticed it. He had been traveling all morning for meetings, rushing from one skyscraper to another, and the weight of the corporate world still clung to him. His sharp suit and polished shoes made him stick out among the casual crowd of students, office workers and regulars who came here for comfort rather than business. Jonathan was a man who had everything money could buy, yet he had always felt a strange emptiness in the spaces between meetings, dinners, and investment calls. Beside him, his son Alex trailed quietly, clutching his backpack strap, his eyes fixed on the worn wooden tables and mismatched chairs. Alex was 15, tall for his age but slight, with a soft expression that contrasted sharply with his father's rigid, businesslike demeanor. Jonathan had noticed that Alex had been quieter than usual lately. The teenager had stopped talking about school, friends, and even his favorite video games. At first, Jonathan had brushed it off as normal teenage moodiness, but a small, nagging worry had begun to gnaw at him. Today, he decided he would try to reach him. Even if he wasn't sure how, they found a corner table near the window, where sunlight streamed in, making the coffee cups gleam. Alex slumped into the chair, clearly uncomfortable, and Jonathan sat opposite him, folding his hands on the table, trying to appear calm. He had hoped that simply being present might encourage Alex to open up, but the silence between them was heavy and awkward. Jonathan glanced around the cafe, his eyes scanning the other patrons, mostly oblivious to the tension at the table beside them. That's when he noticed her. Emily was a young waitress with a bright, approachable smile, her hair tied back in a loose ponytail. She moved from table to table with an easy grace, carrying trays of drinks and plates of food, chatting with regulars, remembering their usual orders, and laughing in a way that seemed genuine and unforced. Jonathan couldn't help but watch as she approached their table. Something in her demeanor seemed different. There was a warmth in her eyes that instantly put people at ease, a soft way of speaking that suggested she truly cared about the people around her as she took their order. Jonathan noticed the way she looked at Alex. He was slouched, frowning slightly, and seemed hesitant to speak. Emily knelt slightly, resting a hand lightly on the table, and smiled at him in a way that was gentle and comforting. "Hey, are you okay?" she asked softly. Jonathan felt a strange, unfamiliar sensation, something like awe mixed with gratitude. She didn't ask in a judgmental way, didn't rush him, didn't demand an answer. She simply noticed his discomfort and offered a small kindness. Alex looked up at her, a flicker of surprise crossing his face. Nobody had really asked if he was okay in a long time, at least not without expecting him to explain everything. He mumbled something under his breath, but Emily didn't push. She just smiled encouragingly and nodded. Jonathan watched quietly, feeling a strange warmth rising in his chest. He realized that this simple act of noticing and caring something he had long taken for granted in his own life was having an effect on his son. Alex's shoulders seemed to relax ever so slightly, his gaze softening as Emily moved on to take other orders. Jonathan leaned back in his chair, feeling a mixture of admiration and unease. He had spent years building his empire, making decisions that affected thousands of people. But he had rarely stopped to see the impact of small, personal gestures. Emily, with her simple human kindness, was doing something he hadn't learned from any. Boardroom. She was reaching Alex in a way Jonathan couldn't. Billionaire father felt a pang of guilt as he thought of all the times he had been too busy to notice Alex's emotions, too focused on deadlines and profits to simply sit and listen. For a moment, Jonathan allowed himself to imagine what it would be like if his life were different, not just in terms of wealth or status, but in the way he related to people, especially his son. Alex had always been sensitive, perceptive, and intelligent. But the pressures of being Jonathan Pierce's son seemed to weigh on him more than anyone could imagine. Jonathan had tried to give Alex the world's expensive gifts, the best schools, opportunities to travel, but he now realized that what Alex needed most was not money or privilege, but attention, empathy, and understanding. Emily returned to check on their table, this time with a small cup of hot chocolate for Alex, a thoughtful gesture she claimed he might like. Alex's eyes lit up in surprise, and a small, genuine smile broke across his face. Jonathan felt a lump form in his throat. He had never seen his son look so cared for, so seen in such a simple, ordinary way. He began to understand more clearly than ever that life was not about wealth or achievements alone. It was about moments like these moments, where someone's kindness could break through a wall of loneliness, where a simple act of empathy could make someone feel understood. Jonathan sipped his coffee slowly, letting the warmth settle in. He realized that this encounter with a stranger, a young waitress who had no idea who he was or what he had accomplished, was already changing the way he saw the world. He had come to the cafe hoping to spend a quiet morning with his son, but he left with something far more valuable, a glimpse of what truly mattered. Emily's small, unassuming act of comfort toward Alex had reminded Jonathan that love, attention, and genuine human connection could be more powerful than anything money could buy. As they finished their drinks, prepared to leave, Jonathan glanced at Alex, whose smile lingered, soft and tentative but real. He knew that today marked a turning point, not just for Alex, but for himself as well. He had witnessed the profound effect of empathy, the quiet strength of kindness, and the simple truth that sometimes the people who touch our lives the most are those we least expect. Jonathan stepped out into the sunlight, holding the door for his son, feeling a spark of hope he hadn't felt in years. For the first time, he considered that maybe, just maybe, the richest thing he could ever offer Alex was his presence, his understanding, and the willingness to truly see him. Jonathan and Alex stepped out of the cafe into the chilly afternoon air, a quiet stillness settling over them. The city buzzed around them, cars honking, people walking briskly, and the distant hum of construction filling the streets. Yet there was a calm bubble surrounding father and son. Jonathan had hoped the cafe encounter, particularly Emily's kindness, might spark some conversation, but Alex remained mostly silent, his hands stuffed into his jacket pockets. Jonathan glanced at him, trying to read the subtle shifts in his expression, noticing how Alex's brows furrowed occasionally, as if he were thinking about something far away. As they walked to the car, Jonathan tried to find the right words. "Alex," he started slowly about earlier, "you seemed a little down. Are you okay?" Alex looked at him briefly, then back at the sidewalk, the wind ruffling his hair. "I'm fine," he muttered, but the words felt hollow, lacking conviction. Jonathan knew that tone. He had heard it in boardrooms when someone gave a report they didn't really mean, trying to cover fear or frustration with politeness. But this wasn't about where Kit was his son. He realized he had never been able to fully read Alex's emotions. Not really. Jonathan remembered how Emily had interacted with Alex in the cafe. Her warmth had been effortless, natural, not forced or strategic. Jonathan, a man who had spent years navigating corporate politics and negotiations, realized how starkly different her approach was from his own. He had been trained to look for outcomes, for gains, for the bottom line. He had built a life around numbers, charts, and decisions that affected thousands. But Emily's impact had been immediate and human. Jonathan felt a pang of guilt. He had overlooked the very thing that mattered most to Alex's attention: empathy and simple kindness. That evening, as they drove home in Jonathan's sleek black SUV, Alex remained mostly quiet, staring out the window at the passing city lights. Jonathan, however, could not stop thinking. He reflected on the past weeks, the arguments, the missed chances to connect. He remembered trying to talk to Alex about school and his friends, only to meet silence or brief, dismissive answers. It had frustrated him, sometimes even angered him, and he had let work and stress take over instead of patience and care. Now, he realized that Alex's withdrawal wasn't rebellion or laziness, it was hurt, loneliness, and a yearning for someone to understand him without judgment. Once they arrived home, Jonathan made an unspoken decision to give Alex space, but also to find ways to bridge the emotional distance between them. He noticed Alex's room, slightly messy, with posters on the walls, books stacked unevenly, and a laptop open on the desk. It was a teenager's world, a space that reflected Alex's personality and interests, which Jonathan had rarely taken the time to notice. Jonathan stood in the doorway quietly, feeling a mixture of pride and sadness. He saw how his son was growing into his own person, yet he realized how little he knew about his son's inner world. Later that night, Asana sat alone in his study, reflecting on his own childhood. He had grown up in wealth and privilege, but the home had been filled with expectations rather than conversations. His father had been distant, more focused on business and appearances than on emotional connection. Jonathan understood now that he had unconsciously repeated the same patterns with Alex, prioritizing achievement over empathy, success over understanding. He felt a deep responsibility to break the cycle. The encounter with Emily had been a mirror, showing him the kind of caring and attentiveness he had been missing. Meanwhile, Alex lay in bed, thinking about the day. Emily's kindness had lingered in his mind. Nobody at school, nobody at home, had really noticed his mood or asked about his feelings in such a genuine way. For the first time in a long while, he felt seen, understood, and even slightly hopeful. It wasn't about the drink or the hot chocolate Emily had brought. It was about the way she had acknowledged him without judgment. That simple act made him feel like he mattered, and he clung to that feeling. A fragile spark of trust in someone outside his family who truly cared. Over the next few days, Jonathan observed Alex more carefully. He noticed the small changes, how Alex smiled slightly more, how he lingered over meals, and how he started talking a little more about things he liked. Jonathan didn't want to force conversation. He simply tried to be present, offering attention without pressure. He realized that he had been trying to fix Alex with gifts, lessons, or advice, but what Alex truly needed was presence, a willingness to listen and understand. Jonathan was learning a new kind of patience, one that had nothing to do with contracts or profit margins, and everything to do with human connection. Jonathan also began reflecting on his own interactions with people outside his family. In boardrooms, meetings, and networking events, he had treated empathy as a tool, a means to an end. But now, watching Alex respond to genuine care, he began to understand the profound difference between calculated concern and true compassion. He wondered how different his life would have been if someone had shown him that kind of understanding. The thought unsettled him, but it also motivated him. He wanted to be the kind of person Alex could rely on, the kind of father who could make his son feel safe, valued, and loved. One evening, Jonathan invited Alex to join him for a simple activity, a walk in the park near their home. Alex was hesitant at first, but agreed. As they walked, Jonathan didn't lecture or ask probing questions. He simply shared small stories about his own experiences, mistakes he had made, and lessons he had learned. Slowly, Alex began to open up, talking about school, friends, and even his frustrations. Jonathan listened without interrupting, realizing that listening itself was a gift more powerful than any advice he could offer. Jonathan also found himself thinking about Emily more than he expected. She had no idea who he was, yet she had touched Alex in a way he hadn't been able to. He admired her courage, empathy, and authenticity. She reminded him that not all influence comes from power, it's money or status sometimes. It comes from being genuinely human. Jonathan considered reaching out, not for himself, but to understand how she had nurtured such kindness in her daily life, to learn from her example as the days passed. Jonathan began implementing small changes in their daily routine. He would take the time to have breakfast with Alex, ask about his day, and share small laughs. Alex started to respond, even initiating conversations on his own. Jonathan noticed a subtle shift in their relationship. A bridge was forming, built not on wealth, expectations, or achievement, but on understanding, presence, and simple acts of care. Through this process, Jonathan realized a deeper truth. Wealth and privilege could never replace the human need for connection and empathy. He understood that his role as a father was not to provide everything money could buy, but to create a space where Alex could feel safe, loved, and truly seen. The quiet lessons of Emily's kindness, the subtle ways she had comforted his son, had opened his eyes to a path he had never considered before. Path of emotional honesty, genuine care, and a willingness to change for the sake of his son. By the end of the week, the once tense atmosphere between father and son had softened. They laughed together over small jokes, shared thoughts about school and friends, and even debated trivial topics like movies and music. Jonathan had discovered that connection was not about grand gestures or perfect parenting. It was about noticing the little things, acknowledging emotions, and allowing space for vulnerability. Alex, in turn, had begun to trust that his father could be a source of support, not just authority. Jonathan understood that this was only the beginning. There would be challenges ahead, moments of tension and frustration. But he felt a renewed determination to be present and attentive. He reflected on Emily's impact once more, realizing that sometimes the people who touch our lives most profoundly are the ones we least expect, ordinary individuals whose kindness can illuminate the darkest corners of our hearts. And in that reflection, Jonathan felt a subtle but powerful shift within himself. A quiet resolve to not only reconnect with his son, but to embrace a life where empathy, understanding, and human connection mattered as much as success and wealth ever could. Jonathan noticed a subtle change in Alex over the past few days. His son's smiles were more frequent, his laughter less forced, and he even started sharing small thoughts about his day. Jonathan felt a mixture of relief and pride, but he knew this fragile connection could easily be disrupted if he misstepped. He had spent years in high-stakes business negotiations, yet now he realized that parenting could be far more complex, requiring patience, sensitivity, and emotional intelligence. It was a challenge unlike any boardroom he had ever entered, and he welcomed it with cautious determination. One afternoon, Jonathan decided to take Alex to the same cafe where they had met. Emily. He wanted to show his son that small moments of comfort and kindness could be meaningful, and perhaps continue building on the spark that had started there. As they entered, Jonathan's eyes quickly scanned the room, looking for the waitress who had left such a profound impression. Emily was busy serving another table, but when she glanced at them, her face lit up with recognition. Jonathan felt a strange warmth at seeing the genuine happiness on her face, not for him, but for Alex. They settled into their usual corner table, and Alex looked around nervously, adjusting his sleeve. Jonathan stayed quiet for a moment, giving his son space to settle. Emily approached their table with her usual friendly smile, and Alex seemed to relax slightly. She greeted him warmly, asking how he had been since the last visit. Her attention was entirely on Alex, not noticing Jonathan's watchful gaze. And Jonathan realized again the power of pure, undivided attention. It was a skill he had rarely practiced, always distracted by tasks, schedules, and responsibilities. As they chatted, Jonathan watched a subtle transformation in his son. Alex opened up about his feelings at school, his struggles with friends, and the pressure he felt to meet expectations at home. Emily listened without interrupting, offering small words of encouragement, nodding, and maintaining eye contact. Jonathan could see Alex visibly relax, leaning slightly forward, engaging in conversation he would have avoided just a week ago. Jonathan realized that sometimes listening could be more powerful than any advice or solution. The act of being truly seen and heard had begun to heal his son in ways Jonathan had never considered. Then, a small incident occurred. Alex, distracted by his own thoughts and the warmth of the moment, accidentally knocked over his cup of juice. The liquid spilled across the table, soaking a corner of his notebook. Alex's face immediately turned red with embarrassment, and he bent over to try and salvage his notes. Jonathan felt a pang of sympathy, but hesitated, unsure how to intervene. He noticed Emily step in instinctively, her calm voice breaking the tension. "It's okay. Accidents happen," she said softly. Grabbing a napkin and helping him clean the mess, Alex looked up at her, a small, relieved smile appearing. Jonathan watched silently, amazed at how quickly Emily diffused what could have been a stressful moment. There was no judgment in her voice, only understanding. She offered a gentle joke about how spills were part of life. And Alex laughed, full genuine laugh, the first he had heard in days. Jonathan felt a deep emotion rise in his chest, a mixture of relief, pride, and awe. He realized that this laughter, this lightness in his son's demeanor, was a gift that money could never buy. Jonathan reflected on the contrast between Emily's approach and his own methods of problem-solving. In business, he would have addressed a mistake with urgency, correction, and sometimes criticism, focused on outcomes rather than feelings. Yet here in a simple cafe, Emily handled the situation with empathy and grace, showing Alex that mistakes were part of life and did not define him. Jonathan felt a wave of humility. He had spent so long trying to control outcomes in his professional and personal life that he had forgotten the value of patience, understanding, and kindness. As the afternoon progressed, Jonathan engaged in quiet observation. He noticed how small gestures mattered, the way Emily maintained eye contact, the gentle tone of her voice, the smile she gave freely. These were simple acts, yet their impact was profound. Jonathan began to understand that Alex's emotional growth did not require grand gestures or expensive interventions. It required consistent, authentic care, attentiveness, and the courage to be vulnerable. Emily was teaching him indirectly, a lesson he had never learned from his own life experiences: transformative power of kindness and human connection. Later, as they left the cafe, Jonathan reflected on his own behavior. He realized that in his pursuit of success, he had neglected the emotional needs of those closest to him. He had tried to provide everything: luxury, comfort, opportunities, yet he had overlooked the most crucial aspect: emotional presence. Watching Emily interact with Alex had illuminated the stark difference between material support and genuine care. Jonathan knew he needed to change, not only for Alex's sake, but also for his own. He wanted to learn how to be the kind of father who could nurture and support his son, not just provide for him. That evening, Jonathan and Alex took a walk along the quiet streets near their home. The city's noise faded behind them, and the cool evening air encouraged reflection and conversation. Jonathan spoke gently about his own experiences, sharing moments from his teenage years, times when he had felt misunderstood, pressured, or lonely. For the first time, Jonathan let himself be vulnerable, showing Alex that even adults struggled with emotions and uncertainty. Alex listened intently, and for the first time, he seemed to relate to his father not just as a parent or authority figure, but as a person who had also faced challenges and fears. Alex began to share his thoughts more openly. He spoke about school, friendships, and the pressure of living up to expectations. Jonathan listened without interrupting, resisting the urge to offer solutions or advice. He realized that sometimes simply hearing his son's thoughts and emotions was more valuable than any corrective action. This moment of shared understanding marked a turning point in their relationship. Jonathan saw a new side of Alex, a confident, thoughtful, and sensitive young man beginning to emerge. Jonathan also reflected on Emily's role in this change. Her actions had shown him that small, consistent gestures of empathy could have a lasting impact. It was not about grand interventions or dramatic solutions. It was about noticing when someone was struggling, offering comfort, and showing genuine care. Jonathan realized that he wanted to emulate this approach, both with Alex and in his own life. He wanted to be someone who could make a difference through attention, understanding, and authentic presence, rather than through wealth or authority alone. The next few days brought subtle but meaningful changes. Jonathan made a conscious effort to spend more quality time with Alex, having breakfast together, discussing movies, sharing small jokes, and listening to his thoughts without judgment. Alex responded positively, opening up in ways he had not before. Their bond grew stronger, built on trust, shared moments, and a mutual understanding that transcended the need for material comforts. Jonathan felt a deep satisfaction, knowing that these simple yet profound interactions were shaping a healthier, happier relationship with his son. Jonathan also began to think about the future. He realized that parenting was not about controlling outcomes or achieving perfection, but about fostering emotional growth, resilience, and understanding. He wanted Alex to know that he was valued, loved, and supported, regardless of mistakes or failures. Inspired by Emily's example, Jonathan understood that he could lead by example, showing empathy, kindness, and authenticity in every interaction. By the end of this turning point, Jonathan and Alex had experienced a subtle but significant shift in their relationship. The tension and distance that had once defined their interactions were replaced by connection, trust, and shared understanding. Jonathan knew that challenges would continue, but he felt equipped with a new perspective and approach. He understood that change required effort, patience, and attention to the small moments that truly mattered. Emily's kindness had illuminated a path for him, a path toward deeper connection, empathy, and emotional presence. Jonathan went to bed that night reflecting on the day. He realized that life's most meaningful moments often came from unexpected sources and simple acts of care. Emily, a young waitress with no knowledge of his wealth or status, had taught him a lesson more valuable than any business strategy, investment, or achievement: the power of genuine human connection. Jonathan felt a renewed sense of purpose, not just as a father, but as a man striving to live with compassion, awareness, and understanding. He understood that this turning point marked the beginning of a profound transformation for both himself and his son. Jonathan sat in his home office late at night, the soft glow of the desk lamp illuminating the papers and devices scattered across the polished wooden surface. Normally, he would be engrossed in analyzing financial reports, reviewing contracts, or planning the next big corporate move. But tonight, his mind was elsewhere, on Alex, on Emily, and on the quiet moments that had shifted something deep inside him. The events of the past weeks played repeatedly in his thoughts: Alex laughing genuinely for the first time in months, Emily's simple gestures of empathy, and the realization that no amount of money could replace true human connection. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling, a sense of clarity slowly forming. Jonathan knew he had been living his life on autopilot, focused on building wealth, achieving status, maintaining control over every aspect of his business empire. He had always believed that providing Alex with opportunities, luxuries, and material comforts was the best way to ensure his son's happiness. But the cafe encounter had shown him something he could no longer ignore. Alex needed more than money. He needed a father who would truly see him, understand him, be present in his life. The next morning, Jonathan approached Alex with a new determination. "I was thinking," he began carefully, "maybe we should spend more time together, just the two of us. No schedules, no distractions. Just us." Alex looked up, curious but cautious, unsure of what his father had in mind. "Like what?" he asked softly. Jonathan smiled, remembering how simple gestures had made such a difference before. "We could start with small things," he suggested. "Walks in the park, cooking together, maybe even working on something creative. I want to understand you better, and I want you to feel comfortable sharing things with me." Over the following days, Jonathan acted on his words. He intentionally carved out time from his busy schedule, leaving meetings and calls behind to be present with Alex. They cooked meals together, laughed over minor mistakes in recipes, and discussed favorite books and movies. Jonathan discovered that these moments were richer than any boardroom victory. He noticed how Alex's energy and confidence began to grow, how he started volunteering his own thoughts and opinions, and how his laughter became more frequent and authentic. Jonathan felt a profound sense of fulfillment he had never experienced through wealth or achievement alone. Meanwhile, Jonathan couldn't stop thinking about Emily. Her influence on Alex had been subtle, yet transformative. She had shown Jonathan the power of kindness, patience, and genuine attention, qualities he had rarely prioritized in his own life. He wanted to understand her perspective, not as a business opportunity or strategic connection, but as a teacher of human compassion. He decided to reach out, introducing himself not as a billionaire, but as a father grateful for the positive impact she had on his son. Emily, surprised but gracious, shared her simple philosophy: noticing people, listening, and offering kindness whenever possible. Jonathan was struck by how uncomplicated her approach was, and yet how powerful it had been in shaping Alex's emotional well-being. Jonathan began applying Emily's lessons more consciously. At work, he started paying attention to his employees beyond their productivity and results, noticing their moods, struggles, and successes. He realized that leadership wasn't just about decisions, profits, and strategies. It was also about empathy, understanding, and human connection. Slowly, he found that this approach created a more positive environment, with people responding genuinely rather than out of obligation. He was learning that influence didn't always come from authority or wealth. Sometimes it came from authentic care and presence at home. Jonathan's commitment deepened. He introduced weekly Father-Son days, where they would leave behind all distractions and simply spend time together. One day they went hiking, sharing stories, jokes, and even moments of quiet reflection. Jonathan noticed that Alex no longer seemed burdened or distant. He laughed freely, expressed his thoughts openly, and sought his father's company voluntarily. Jonathan felt a swell of pride and gratitude. He had learned that small, consistent acts of care, just like Emily's could, transform a relationship over time. Jonathan also made an intentional decision regarding his own life priorities. He realized that the relentless pursuit of wealth had consumed him, leaving little room for personal connection and fulfillment. He began delegating more responsibilities at work, trusting his team to handle tasks he had once controlled directly. This gave him the freedom to focus on relationships that truly mattered. Particularly with Alex, it was a significant change, and not without risk. But Jonathan understood that this investment in emotional presence rather than financial gain was far more valuable than any business success. One afternoon, while Alex worked on a school project at the dining table, Jonathan joined him. They talked openly about hopes, fears, and dreams, topics they had never explored before. Jonathan shared stories of his own adolescence, including failures, fears, and lessons learned. Alex listened intently, feeling a new sense of connection with his father. Jonathan realized that vulnerability, honesty, and attentiveness were far more effective in building trust than rules, expectations, or material gifts. He felt that the turning point had arrived. A genuine emotional bond was forming, one that would guide both of them toward a healthier, more fulfilling relationship. Jonathan also began reflecting on the broader impact of these changes. He realized that wealth alone was meaningless if it could not create happiness or strengthen relationships. He wanted to use his influence and resources to foster genuine human connections, not only in his family, but in the communities he touched. This insight sparked a shift in his philanthropic and business endeavors. He started initiatives focused on mentorship, community support, and emotional well-being. Inspired by the simple yet powerful acts of kindness he had witnessed in Emily and wanted to emulate. During this period, Jonathan observed subtle changes in himself as well. He felt lighter, more fulfilled, and more capable of appreciating life beyond boardrooms and contracts. Small things, a smile from Alex, a thoughtful gesture from Emily, or quiet moments together became sources of joy. He realized that true wealth was not measured in dollars or status, but in meaningful relationships, emotional presence, and the ability to positively impact others' lives. The decision he had made to prioritize these elements was transforming him as much as it was transforming Alex. Jonathan also began noticing the ripple effects of his actions. Alex, once quiet and reserved, now engaged more openly with friends and teachers. He demonstrated empathy, patience, and understanding, influenced by the attention and care he had received. Jonathan realized that nurturing emotional intelligence in a child created a profound impact, shaping not just immediate happiness but lifelong character. He felt immense satisfaction, knowing that his decision to change would benefit his son far beyond their immediate experiences together. One evening, Jonathan invited Emily to the house for coffee. Thanking her for her role in supporting Alex, they spoke candidly about empathy, kindness, and the subtle ways human attention could transform someone's life. Emily expressed humility, insisting that she had only done what anyone might do in her position. Yet Jonathan saw that her authenticity had a powerful impact. The conversation inspired him further, reinforcing his commitment to foster relationships based on genuine care, understanding, and presence, rather than authority or wealth. By the end of this period, Jonathan's life had taken a noticeable shift. He had become a father more present, a mentor more attentive, and a person more aware of the true value of human connection. The relationship with Alex had blossomed into one filled with trust, communication, and mutual respect. Jonathan felt a deep sense of fulfillment, recognizing that his life-changing decision to prioritize emotional presence, empathy, and kindness was reshaping not only his family, but himself. He had chosen a path that emphasized love, understanding, and human connection over the relentless pursuit of material success. Jonathan realized that this choice was not a temporary experiment, but a permanent transformation. He knew that challenges would continue, that parenting would still test his patience, and that balancing work and family would remain difficult. Yet he felt equipped with new insight, tools, and perspective. The life-changing decision he had made to focus on genuine connection, guided by the simple acts of kindness he had witnessed in Emily, was already producing results far more meaningful than he had ever imagined. His son was thriving, their bond was strengthening, and he had discovered a depth of fulfillment that wealth alone could never provide. The months that followed were unlike any Jonathan Pierce had experienced in his life. The bustling world of high finance and business deals still existed, of course, but it had taken a back seat to something far more important: his relationship with Alex and the lessons he had learned about genuine human connection. Jonathan had started to realize that wealth, power, and influence were hollow without the presence of love, empathy, and understanding. And for the first time, he was experiencing the fulfillment that came from being emotionally present in his son's life. Alex had changed significantly over these months. Gone were the days of withdrawal, quiet frustration, and sadness. In their place was a more confident, expressive, and joyful teenager. Jonathan observed these changes with a sense of pride and amazement. Alex laughed freely, shared his thoughts and feelings, and even began offering advice and opinions to his father. Jonathan recognized that this shift was not sudden or magical. It was the result of patience, empathy, and consistent attention. Emily's kindness had sparked the initial change, but Jonathan's dedication had nurtured it into something lasting and meaningful. One Saturday morning, Jonathan and Alex sat at the kitchen table, the sunlight streaming through the large windows. They were preparing breakfast together, a simple activity that had become a cherished ritual. Alex was flipping pancakes while Jonathan chopped fruit for a salad. They joked about the pancake disasters of the past, laughed at the small messes they made, and shared stories about school, friends, and dreams for the future. Jonathan felt a sense of calm and satisfaction he had never experienced in a boardroom or during a high-stakes negotiation. These small, ordinary moments had become extraordinary in their impact. Jonathan also noticed that Alex had begun to mirror the kindness he had received. At school, he showed empathy toward friends, helped classmates who were struggling, and even offered comfort to those going through difficult times. Jonathan realized that Alex was learning to internalize the lessons of compassion, patience, and understanding not just from Emily, but from his father as well. It was a ripple effect, proof that positive, authentic influence could extend far beyond immediate interactions. Jonathan felt proud not because he had taught these things in a traditional sense, but because he had created an environment where Alex could flourish emotionally. Their evenings became a time of connection as well. Jonathan would set aside work, and they would spend time reading together, discussing movies, or playing games. Jonathan learned to listen more than he spoke, to ask questions without judgment, and to create space for Alex to express himself fully. He discovered that emotional presence required patience and humility, qualities he had rarely exercised in his professional life, but had grown to value deeply. He was learning alongside his son, both of them growing in understanding and empathy with each shared experience. Jonathan also reflected on his own life. The encounter with Emily and the changes in his relationship with Alex had taught him to reassess what truly mattered. He began to shift his priorities, not abandoning his career, but redefining success to include personal growth, meaningful connections, and emotional fulfillment. He realized that he had spent too many years chasing wealth and status at the expense of relationships that mattered. The life-changing decision he had made to invest time and attention in Alex was not only transforming his son's life, but also his own. He was discovering that true happiness came not from achievements or material possessions, but from love, empathy, and human connection. Jonathan also sought to extend this understanding beyond his family. He initiated new projects in his business and philanthropic endeavors that focused on community support, education, and emotional well-being. He encouraged mentorship programs, small acts of kindness within his company, and initiatives to help people connect with one another. Jonathan realized that influence could be a force for good when combined with empathy and care, and he was determined to use his resources to create a positive impact that extended far beyond himself. Alex noticed these changes too. He saw his father treating employees and strangers with attentiveness and compassion, prioritizing relationships over profit in subtle but meaningful ways. This modeled for Alex the kind of person he could aspire to become, someone who valued empathy, kindness, and connection over superficial success. Alex began to adopt these values in his own interactions, creating a positive cycle that strengthened their bond even further. Jonathan felt a sense of joy and accomplishment that no financial success could have given him. One afternoon, Jonathan and Alex took a trip to the cafe where it had all begun. Emily was there, just as welcoming as ever. Jonathan introduced Alex with pride, and Alex smiled confidently at her. Emily was delighted to see how much Alex had grown, how open, kind, and happy he had become. Jonathan felt a deep sense of gratitude. He understood that Emily's influence had sparked something important, but it was the combination of her empathy and his conscious effort as a father that had transformed Alex's emotional world. The visit was a symbolic reminder of how small acts of kindness, if nurtured and supported, could create lasting change. Jonathan also began to notice subtle changes in himself that he hadn't expected. He was calmer, more patient, and more present in all areas of his life. He no longer measured success solely by profit margins or business deals. He measured it by the strength of relationships, the growth of his son, and the well-being of those around him. He had discovered a depth of fulfillment and purpose that had been missing for years. Jonathan realized that his life-changing decision to prioritize empathy, connection, and presence was reshaping not just his relationship with Alex, but the very essence of who he was. Even ordinary family moments became precious. Preparing dinner together, sharing laughter over a movie, or simply walking through the park felt meaningful in ways Jonathan had never anticipated. He noticed how Alex's personality had flourished with care and attention, how trust had replaced fear and distance, and how their bond had become resilient and genuine. Jonathan felt a quiet pride, understanding that parenting was not about control or perfection, but about being present, empathetic, and consistent in love. By the end of this period, Jonathan had fully embraced a new way of life. He balanced his career with the demands of family, always making room for the emotional needs of Alex and the people around him. He had learned that wealth and status were temporary, but emotional bonds, trust, and understanding could create a legacy far more lasting and valuable. The relationship with his son had evolved into one of mutual respect, love, and openness, a connection that would support Alex throughout his life. Jonathan also appreciated the subtle lessons of gratitude and humility. He recognized that it took courage to change, to step away from a life defined by power and control, and to embrace vulnerability, empathy, and care. He understood that it was never too late to redirect one's life toward what truly mattered. The transformation he experienced was both personal and relational, a testament to the power of human connection to heal, nurture, and inspire. As they sat together one evening, watching the sunset from their backyard, Jonathan reflected on the journey. From the first moment he saw Emily comforting Alex, to the small steps he had taken to be present, To the profound changes in both himself and his son, he felt a deep sense of peace. He realized that true wealth was not measured in assets or titles, but in the love, trust, and joy shared with those we care about most. Alex leaned against him, smiling, and Jonathan held him close, feeling the weight of past mistakes dissolve, replaced by hope, connection, and fulfillment. In the end, Jonathan understood that the life-changing decision he had made to prioritize empathy, kindness, and presence over control and wealth had created a legacy that would last far beyond any business achievement. Alex had grown into a confident, compassionate young man, and Jonathan had discovered a depth of happiness and purpose he had never imagined. Their lives had been transformed by small moments of attention, understanding, and care, proving that genuine human connection was the richest gift of all. The story concluded not with grandeur or wealth, but with the simple, profound truth that love, empathy, and presence could change lives forever.